大家好，欢迎来到刚刚连线。Not only China celebrates in 2020, Germany celebrates 30 years of reunification, precisely on October 3rd. Born in West Germany in 1973, your correspondent Gangang can in fact look back on a time before the reunification, the evolution ever since, and an attempt at outlook. Disclaimer. Of course it's politically correct, especially on a date like this, to demand to finally overcome all the walls inside the heads. I'm all for it. At the same time, I'm a fact-based observer, not afraid to speak truth to power. So let's have a good look. It's like the moon landing or 9/11. If you were alive at that moment, you will likely remember for the rest of your life where you were at the very moment of receiving the news. I happened to be outside of Germany in the USA as part of a one-year high school student exchange. How many times had I been asked during that year which part I was from, the free one or the non-free one? But hey, the same people also wondered if I had come to the US by car or train or plane, or even if we had cars in Germany. Those more serious, like my host family, would often ask me if I thought reunification was possible. 16 at the time, I had only known the Cold War and was totally convinced this would never happen, let alone that year. And then it did happen, almost out of the blue. I saw the Berlin Wall come down on TV and received an allegedly genuine piece of its concrete sometime later. I saw ecstatic people on both sides hugging each other in a sea of German flags. Remember, until immediately before, the border was heavily fortified by the East, shooting to kill everybody who tried to leave unauthorized. Germany was the dedicated battleground should the Cold War become hot. Two German armies would fight each other immediately. Even as a small child, I had been acutely aware of that border and that some relatives were living on the other side, but like in a prison. Little did I understand at the time that it was the weakening Soviet Union, exhausted from the arms race with the US, which progressively lost control of its allies like Poland, Czechoslovakia, Hungary, and the imminent insolvency of the East German state itself, which caused the miracle. But it became increasingly clear that German reunification was only the most visible sign of the end of the Cold War and the Iron Curtain. The German rock band Scorpions had its biggest hit with Wind of Change, which captured the mood worldwide. Our Chancellor at the time, Helmut Kohl, seized the historic opportunity. From 1949, the goal of reunification was part of our basic constitutional law in West Germany. Yet, when the opportunity came, not every politician was eager to take on the gargantuan task. Kohl fortunately did, eager to write history. He promised to the East Germans that flourishing landscapes would spring up in a time comparable to the economic miracle after World War II in the West. To the West Germans, he promised it wouldn't really cost them anything. Then reality started to set in, brutally. I, for my part, soon discovered that several times more tons of concrete from the wall had been sold than had ever existed, while large parts were still standing. But seriously, we Germans didn't clear the self-set bar in several other important respects. We had always targeted to make a proper constitution for a reunited Germany, replacing our basic constitutional law involving both Germanys to create a best of all worlds. That was quietly forgotten. It all rather seemed like an acquisition between companies. At first, like a friendly takeover, but later some people felt it even was rather like a hostile takeover. A missed and unique opportunity. It even took a long debate and very close vote in Parliament to move the capital from tiny interim Bonn back to Berlin. It is emblematic how the name search went to describe the former East Germany, the German Democratic Republic or GDR, in the United Germany. In legal terms, the East simply acceded to the West. Reunification might suggest a bilateral movement, but not one swallowing up the other again. To hide this ugly truth, eventually the term 5 new federal states was coined, which became the new states. Given that the united history of Germany is rather an Eastern one, with Habsburg's Vienna and Prague, Bismarck's Berlin, West equals old and East equals new, still expresses in whose perspective history was made and written here. Kohl's flourishing landscapes are still a cuss word today, 30 years later. Slowly climbing back with education and some flourishing cities like Leipzig or Dresden leading the way, even in 2020, Eastern salaries are still 17% lower, unemployment is 2 percentage points higher, the median wealth per person only 1/4, and only 7% of the 500 largest companies, German companies, are headquartered there in the East. Looking at the study of the self-perceived happiness, the old border jumps at the eye. The gap is similar to, for example, Sweden versus USA and has not narrowed since the study was made. East Germans vote more radical, not only on the left, understandable after 40 years of rule of the one-party socialist government, but also on the right. The right extremist party AfD's successors draw pretty much the same map. A cornerstone of their policy is xenophobia, but due to the historic divisions, it's in East Germany where the most people have no migratory background. Reunification did not pay for itself either, of course. The exact value is hard to calculate, but about 2,000 billion euros is the order of magnitude of transfers from west to east for only little more than 16 million people there, or 125,000 euro per person. There were 17 million initially and then 2 millions moved to the west since. I have this in mind when thinking about how realistic it would be for Germany to help European partners in difficulties in a meaningful way. 30 years and so much money later, and still divisible border. Colloquially, we often still call each other Wessis for Western Germans and Ossis for Eastern Germans. Wessis accused Ossis of not having built up their country after the war like they had. Laziness or incompetence were more or less silent accusations. Ossis called Wessis the Besserwessis, a play with words similar to German Besserwisser, meaning arrogant know-it-alls. As in the ex-USSR, although more discreet, the powerful made a killing by acquiring public property at a huge discount, knowing it was worth much more. Corruption reached the highest national political level and even the European level. Countries wanted a compensation for allowing Germany to become once more the heavyweight in Europe. Maybe worst for the Aussies, even what was better there was not adopted in a united Germany. If you consider that a green arrow allowing you to turn right even at a red traffic light is the best known exception, that says a lot. Yet, the socialistic form of state also had more significant strengths. To name a few, a very wide and even healthcare coverage, a childcare system allowing women to choose work and family, not either or, and no open unemployment. Only now is the West at least trying to catch up with the East in terms of childcare. Lately, people mobility is improving, especially from West to East, which might ultimately be decisive. China and the US are to North and South Korea somewhat similar to what the USSR and the US were to the two Germanys. I hope Korea will also reunite one day, and there's now a precedent what to do and what not to do in that case to make it a success. For many scientists, Germans are a fascinating subject. The wall stood from 1961 to 1989, which is a little less time than it is gone now. The German people were one until the occupation zones led to two states, which were vastly different in political and socio-economic terms. Being able to eliminate genetics, geography, cultural heritage, and the like, sociologists, medical doctors, and many others can observe how the organization of a society influenced the people. Not only that, now they can even see what and how long it takes to fuse the societies back together. In fact, even after 30 years, the following joke can still be told. Says the Aussie, "We are one people." Says the Wessie, "We also." So now, it's up to you to connect the pieces. 再见。